I'm going to start with a high-level overview of some research that we did at ISCRR about 2018, 2019, and it'll just go for about 10 minutes or so, and then the rest of the time we'll be talking about the impacts of the research with Nick. So I'd like to acknowledge Petra Bywood and Amanda Moo, who did most of the research that I'm going to be talking about today, as well as Jimmy Twin, who has led most of the research impact. And again, I'd like to thank Nick for joining us. He was involved with the research as well as a lot of the impact work. Okay, so bitumen is used as a binder in the production of asphalt for road surfaces. Heated bitumen emits a complex mixture of vapours and particulate matter. And WorkSafe had received a number of complaints about fuming loads, and they asked ISCRR to review the evidence on the risks of bitumen exposure for roadside paving workers. So we did two sorts of research. We did an evidence review and an environmental scan. So the evidence review looks at the published peer-reviewed academic literature, and then the environmental scan is really what's happening out there on the ground, what we can find by doing a worldwide sort of desktop scan, looking at government institution reports, industry reports, any other research organisations, which includes stuff that might not be published in peer-reviewed literature. And it also involved a number of interviews as well with unions and other industry groups, including asphalt companies. So looking at the evidence review first, what we were looking for, what were the adverse health effects associated with bitumen exposure, and also the strategies to minimise the health risks to roadside workers. And yeah, as I said, we looked at the online resources and interviews for the environmental scan. Okay, let's have a look at what we found for this. The health effects of bitumen exposure. This is from the peer-reviewed literature. There was some evidence of a decline in lung function in workers pre versus post shift, but also in the exposed versus non-exposed workers. We also found lots of evidence of increased respiratory symptoms after bitumen exposure, and this included like cough, wheezing, shortness of breath, and chest tightness. We also found evidence of increased inflammatory markers and also increased eye irritation. As far as the chronic effects, we did find some evidence of a link between bitumen exposure and development of some cancers, but also increased biomarkers that represent organ toxicity, tissue injury, or DNA damage. And as far as looking at the risk mitigation, we found that there was a reduced risk of exposure with personal protective clothing, air purifying respiratory masks, substituting biodiesel for cleaning equipment, and also design integrated fume capture system on the paver machines that was found to be more efficient than other models. Okay, and moving on to the environmental scan findings. So what do we find in this, the environmental scan? We found that there was 3 different types of asphalt. There's hot mix, which was the predominant one used in Australia. And that's the one they have to heat to 170, 180 degrees Celsius to lay the roads. And that's the one that really has the issues with the fuming and the sort of the workers breathing in the fumes. We also found there's warm mix, which in a lot of countries in the world would started to be used more than the hot mix. And that's about 20 to 50 degrees lower temperature, both the making and the laying of the asphalt on the roads. And cold mix asphalt was used mainly for repairing of roads. We also found that there's inclusion of different sorts of recycled materials into that asphalt mix. We found that the job role has a lot to do with, the exposure. We found that paver and screed operators were more exposed compared to other job taskers. And the screed operators are the ones that stand on the very back of the machines as they move along, and they're the ones sort of breathe in the most fumes. Also, when diesel's used as a slip agent and to clean paving equipment, there are more fumes from that as well. In the environmental scan, we also found, like in the evidence reviews, reports of acute health effects. That included eye, nose, throat and skin irritation and headache, nausea, vomiting and respiratory discomfort. We also found that there was inconsistent testing. All the different asphalt companies do testing through NATA accredited laboratories, and all the results had actually come back that, that the levels were fine in the atmospheric testing. As far as the incident goes, surveys of workers found that a large proportion of them had experienced symptoms, and they found that they were common, whereas asphalt companies said that there were only odd cases, and they were quite responsive when there had been, a case reported. And so what we felt and heard from during the interviews and that it's mostly a problem of underreporting. A lot of the workers were experiencing their symptoms, but they weren't reporting them. And why would that be? There's a number of reasons that were suggested to us, including worker characteristics. Workers don't want to be sort of seen as being complaining and that, and they just really have a desire to get the job finished, and without too much complaining, and also fear of reprisals, and also a perceived lack of response from management. So we went on then after we'd finished the research, and Jimmy led the research translation work. So I'm going to talk to Nick about these sort of 4 different things, and then we're going to go on and answer some of the questions. So Nick, would you like to talk to us about the key stakeholder meetings?
Yeah, thanks, Janine. I suppose we made some inquiries about what had been done overseas to address some of these issues as well. And we found out in the States that the emergence of PMBs, polymodified binders, in the late 90s, early 2000s, there was a collaborative approach with the unions, with the producers, with the regulators, to sort of tease out these issues and find solutions. So that was the first focus for us, and we utilised the key points from the findings using the gap analysis effectively from the ISCRR report to form the basis of our agenda and what we're trying to achieve.
Excellent, thanks, Nick. What about the Department of Transport specification, industry switch to warm mix asphalt?
Well, I suppose the project really kicked off as they went through quite a significant restructure. So that was we was a number of position changes and whatnot, and but we over time we found that there was a separate tender process for employers who wanted to produce warm mix asphalt, and we made it through the forum. We managed to encourage and get the specification changed at the Department of Transport to allow employers to use warm mix asphalt interchangeably. So I mean, warm mix had been around for well over 10 years, 15 years. I know there was trials back in 2008, 2010, and it just sort of died away in Australia. So yeah, in I think April 2021 is when they changed the specifications, and yeah, it was a really significant moment for us and the stakeholder group and the industry as a whole.
Excellent, thanks, Nick. Can you tell us a bit more about the standardised testing method to identify hazardous compounds in the bitumen? Nice.
Well, this is one that I probably didn't get to speak to enough last time, and it is probably one that's quite outstanding still. We managed to get a list of all the compounds that all the major parties are testing for. We've got mixed information, and as you stated before, there's the testing that was getting was performed was coming back within spec, and no issues, but the workers were still having blood noses and respiratory discomfort and vomiting and whatnot. So we managed to, I think in the previously a lot of companies were quite reluctant to share any information, and one of the key points from the report was information dissemination across the industry was not occurring. So there's only there's only two major bitumen suppliers in Victoria, and if company A has a problem with a supply of bitumen, well, there's every chance that company B will have the same problem. So we really tried to focus on that, and then if you add in the emergence of some of these other new polymer modified products and recycled products with plastics and rubber and whatnot, we want to ensure that we are covering all bases. And it's really, bitumen is such a complex or varied compound depending on where it comes from around the world and how it was produced, and making sure that we are covering all the potential compounds that's possibly in there. So for when it does go wrong, we are, if we get the temperatures consistent, but there's still unfortunately margin for error, and we want to make sure that when those systems fail, or when there's a higher temperature truck load produced, that we are ensuring that all compounds are covered in the testing. So that's an ongoing part of the project, but we are hopefully getting there.
Okay, excellent, thank you. What about alternative slip release agents or products?
Well, again, with the warm mix, I thought that, we thought these two were pretty key to relatively easy wins. I didn't think that the warm mix specification change was the issue. So with the diesel, we were quite shocked to find in our survey that 57% of the industry was still using diesel as a slip agent, and some of those were the bigger companies too. Now, there's been alternative products around for a very long time. I personally use them, and went all across the country operating a shuttle buggy where you can't get away with using diesel. You need to use an alternative product because you're so exposed to the fumes and to the product. So we thought that we can get a list of commercially available products that people are using. Initially we wanted to get a product A is very good for this type of for maybe in your diesel buckets where they're cleaning their tools, and product B is probably better used for in your spray systems. But there was commercial issues there, and that arose. So we, AFPA, with consultation with the key stakeholders group, developed a document, a document of guidance about how to safely use alternative products. And although we would have liked some stronger wording in there about diesel, not being should not be used, it was a good step forward. And then the current list of available products that are out there, that's accessible to some of the smaller companies, your mid to small companies. Because we had a lot of questions on that. Where do you get it? How much does it cost? There's, again, reinventing the wheel. Some companies had problems with products destroying their rubbers on their pavers, on the spray systems, and wanted to share that information, so we're not reinventing the wheel. So it's been good.
Excellent. So now are we seeing preferences for warm mix tenders now?
Well, unfortunately, the take-up has been slow, and I think there's a number of issues as to why. I think there needs to be a bit more education as to the benefit of having warm mix as an alternative. You've got your principal contractors that maybe aren't quite as informed as they could be. And then you've got your lower tier sort of asphalt subcontract companies that are, the default is if the asphalt isn't performing, bump the temperature up. Or if they're doing a lot of handwork, driveways, intricate handwork, they prefer to have it hotter in the truck for longer because they're doing it with wheelbarrows and bobcats, and they'll be able to work with it. But what we know is that if the warm mix is done properly, it can be just as good, or if not better. You've got longer transit times, you've got longer workability once it is outside of the truck, and some of the early issues around compaction when they roll it and getting that quality assurance through the compaction, we're actually finding some of that's better under warm mix from the information that we've got at the moment. So yeah, there's still a bit of work to do in that space. Should be talking, especially you try to cut through to the sustainability side, the energy production, all the financial benefits, let alone knowing that temperature is the key factor in the emission release in bitumen. So we really tried to focus on where those 2 points cross over, your quality and your safety. And we know that the rule of thumb of 175 degrees Celsius, as you said before, is your rule of thumb, but that was been based around the specifications of big braze because it begins to oxidize at that temperature. So prior to this, it wasn't really spoken about a great deal. Well, if it's oxidizing and it's limiting the long-term life of the bitumen, what's it doing to the worker who's working directly above it? So there's obviously many benefits to warm mix asphalt, but that's probably the next step. But what we are seeing is more consistent temperatures across the job sites. So maybe they are using an additive, but there's definitely a greater focus on consistent temperatures, which has been fantastic. At the start of this project, I would go on site, during COVID, where we'd have lots of access to the roads, and people were laying a lot more asphalt than what they previously had because they had earlier access to the roads. And it would be 1 in 3 would have a temperature gun accessible on site. There would be inconsistencies with the temperatures of the trucks on site, and there just was a lack of awareness or a lack of focus on ensuring that consistency was there. So yeah, I mean, we're seeing a lot more consistent temperatures, that they're lower spikes. You might get, previously it was 10 trucks in a row, and they might do a changeover to supply a different crew with a different type of mix. And with an asphalt plant, you can't just turn the heat down. You can turn it up, but it's quite difficult to turn it down. And so yeah, there is obviously a much better awareness.
Excellent. Did you find any air monitoring data, either in Australia or overseas, that has results that you can compare between hot and warm asphalt? And is there a significant change in airborne data?
Well, yeah, like I said, with the report identifying that the temperature is the key factor in emission release, it's that aligns perfectly with the air monitoring results that we've seen since. And yeah, I mean, it's again, that's quality versus safety crossover, and any of the potential hydrocarbons or any of the other nasty stuff that is potentially in the products, we are seeing a reduction in those temperatures. But as soon as it creeps up, you go from 155 or 150 degree asphalt, and you can visually see the fume coming off, as opposed to below those temperatures where it's negligible. And you can't even smell it, as opposed to your standard type hot mix.
Interesting. Do you think that the content of the bitumen fumes has become more hazardous with the inclusion of recycled products?
Well, again, I suppose it comes back to those systems of work and making sure that all bases are covered when it comes to risk management. And there's still some education out there for the workers. A lot of them, and it's not a fault of the supervisor or it's just not front of mind to talk about what the product is, what they're laying that day. It's just there's such an emphasis on getting the job done, and there's only a few crews that refuse to take the hand lance, for instance. It's a gas torch, it's a gas burner that they use to heat the cold asphalt, where they're joining the new asphalt too. And if you're using a polymodified binder, or rubber, or a plastic, you reduce that temperature by 40 degrees. But as soon as you put the hand lance on there, you're potentially exposing the worker to some nasty chemicals. So I suppose that we definitely need to educate around that and capture that in their systems of work, in their swims. Make sure they understand those risks and how to mitigate those risks.
Excellent. We've got a question from someone in our audience. Have you published the air monitoring results? Are they published anywhere?
No. When we've only received the list of the compounds that the employers are testing for, and I haven't seen the data. From across the industry, I've seen individual test results, but sharing that information with me is not in there. That's something that they won't easily do. But there's some core compounds that they are all testing for, but there's quite a scope of other compounds that aren't getting consistently tested for.
Excellent. What are the alternatives to diesel fuel as a slip agent? This is another question from our audience.
Well, there's a number of products. There's some that have been around for a very long time. There's canola based, there's citrus based, there's some other paraffin type, which seems counterproductive. But there's a number of different items. Some work better than others, but sometimes it's the workers aren't used to that product, or and all of that's where some of the headaches have been. When, like, if you go back to the example with the hoses and the pumps failing after using a different product, we've gone back to using diesel because it works better, right? And it works really well, and it's about as cheap as some of these products now, depending on where they get it from and what the product is. But all of this comes back down to consultation. If we're following introduction of anything that could affect the workers' health and safety, making sure that they have the opportunity to have their views expressed and those views taken into account before they either using a new asphalt product or a new slip release product, and constantly reviewing that and making sure that they're aiming for your best practice and just aiming to get it better. If the product doesn't work, find something else and consult with the workforce. Okay, thanks, Nick.
Is the effect, the health effects on workers, is that cumulative? Like, do we know if the effects are lasting once the risk is removed? The person who asked this question was thinking about job rotation benefits.
Well, yeah, the job rotation is interesting because, depending on the level of where the company is in the tier, your bigger companies, they'll operate 9 or 10 crew members, and that allows for a floating person, the ability to train up somebody on a different piece of plant. But you get down to your lower tier, you're often running 7 or 8, and that's where your job rotation becomes very, very difficult. And the nature of the job is that the environmental conditions can change significantly on a daily basis, and sometimes on an hourly basis. You might have one person who's running a level on the right-hand side of the paver, who's got the nice breeze coming across their face, that aren't getting any exposure or fume in their breathing zone, and the person on the other side of the screen is coughing it the whole time. So there's and that can change. They can go around the corner, the wind's going the other way, or they go up on a bridge, or the night shift is another where the wind drops off and it doesn't dissipate. It just sort of settles in the area. So there's a number of factors there, and also a lot of people have worked hard to get onto that paver. You know, it's quite an intricate role, and you need somebody that's on the ball, because if that fails, the job, if they're not onto it, it becomes a big problem for the rest of the crew, the quality of the job. So, you know, ensuring that you've got enough people to rotate is one. Two, making sure that they understand why the rotation is important when it comes to exposure. But I know I'm rattling on a little bit here, but the cumulative stuff, like we've seen asphalt pavers with the exhaust stack almost directly in the operator's face, where we've had to insist that needs to be extended, or they're operating from the other side. But that's not always ideal either, because depending on the side of the paver they need to operate on, it can be quite difficult. But you know, you're talking diesel particulate matter, you know, that they benzene, polyaromatic hydrocarbons, silica, you know, all of these things, they can affect the lungs, you know, all of them. So, you know, we have concerns that people are possibly testing for these things individually, and we need to make sure that we are thinking about the total effect on the worker. And that's, you know, it's already a very, very high risk job. You know, you've got plant and people that must cross over quite closely, as opposed to other construction. Often you'll have a roller driver coming very close to a rake hand who's trying to keep up with the paver. The further that person's raking, the further they fall behind the paver, the harder the job is. So often everybody's working just within their peripherals, and you know, there's a lot of crushing, you know, injuries, you know, deglovings, you know, a lot of, you know, you've got road traffic, you know, obviously when you're hard up against traffic sometimes, and yeah, so there's a lot of factors that, you know, outside of this that, you know, can lead to some horrible situations. So yeah, it's you know, when you're talking, you know, I think I made the point last time, and you know, on that slide package it said that the two key risk mitigation were PPE and masks. Now, it's not always practical. You know, if you're wearing a respirator and earmuffs and a hard hat, longs and longs, you know, often glasses and gloves, you know, you're leaning over for, you know, 95% of the job, you know, dealing with quite hot asphalt, quite hot machinery, really intense, you know, slip, trips and falls. You know, it's once the asphalt's on the ground, it's all systems go, and you've got to get that done before it cools down. Another benefit of warm mix asphalt, but so, you know, there's all these factors must be taken into account.
Excellent. I've got another question here from saying, am I correct in understanding that there are minimal or no hydrocarbons and nasties at 155 degrees Celsius and below? And if so, is there a graph that shows the increase in release past this temperature? So are there, any minimal or no hydrocarbons and nasties released at 155 degrees?
Again, I'd like to see that data myself, because, you know, again, this is it's reasonably early days with the trials of warm mix and getting those products becoming commonplace. So what we are seeing is it's reduced and within well under the exposure standard from what we've seen. But most of the time, and this is my concern, is when that testing's getting done, you've got you know, usually every man and their dog out there, or, you know, like a better term, I probably should use a different analogy, but you know, you've got and so all the systems are perfect. You know, everything's great. You know, the asphalt plant knows the testing's going on, and so it's outside of that, you know, 6 months down the track, when, you know, the culture of getting this job done, right? It's a matter of getting traffic set up, cutting a hole, cleaning the hole, filling the hole, yeah, and getting off the road within that designated time period for the MOA on the road, and yeah, it's difficult, right? Where you might get some trucks all day that have been perfect, well under temperature, and all well and good. And then towards the end of the job, they've done a changeover at the plant. They've been supplying somebody else, and they've set it out in a rush because it's closing. That gap is closed. That window is closing. So you know, we want to make sure that that you know, if we are putting recycled products or whatever into this, that we're not exposing them to anything outside of what they should be.
Yeah, definitely. Questions are still coming thick and fast. What is the problem with diesel as a slip agent? I thought the diesel engine exhaust was a health risk, not the fuel.
I suppose it's the conditions that you use it in. You know, on an asphalt paver, if you bought an asphalt paver even 10 years ago, or maybe a bit more, they've got a high pressure hose on it that they spray the hoppers down and the augers and the chains and all that. So, you know, cold steel and hot bitumen stick really well together. Same as their tools. They've got diesel buckets either side of the asphalt paver, where they dip their tools in, their rakes and their shovels. With that high pressure hose, most pavers back 20 years ago, definitely 20 years ago, didn't have a separate reservoir. That ran straight off the diesel tanks from the plant itself. So now the new plant have a separate reservoir. We're still finding people filling that up with diesel here and there, but you know, if you look at the SDS for any diesel, it says, you know, if there's any risk of it getting on your skin, that, you know, you must, you know, wear impervious PPE. That's like a PVC gloves and apron and, you know, and whatnot. But you know, it creates a mist. They're spraying the whole hopper down like this, and you know, you can taste it. You can taste it on your skin, on your lips, and you know, often, you know, that they might not be changing their pants every day. You know, and it says that if it gets on your clothing, you must change your clothes immediately. And you know, you could definitely smell it on people. On yourself. You know, you might go and even if you wash your hands, everybody's filled their car up and got a little bit of petrol or diesel or something on their hands, and then even after washing them, you can still taste it when you go to eat at lunch or something later. So it is a known carcinogen through your thermal absorption, and it's a high risk of skin cancer as well. So you know, again, that's a no-brainer for us that we shouldn't be using it. It works very well, don't get me wrong, but and that's the problem, because the guys you know, on the ground, they've used it forever and they know it works well. So if you get a product that's not working as well, they're more likely to jump back to the diesel. Yeah,
it's certainly not something I think you'd want on your skin, and as you say, or your clothes. The next question is: ambient temperature likely to have an impact on people working with bitumen, for example, hot summer days and heat waves?
100%. If again we go back to the total exposure, if even on a 25-degree day, if you're taking all the factors when you're in risk management, when you're dealing with thermal exposure, access to cold water, access to shade, you know, what's the you know, is there wind, you know, all of these often they're not available. And you know, you might have the crew bus or some sort of crew truck with a fridge and some water bottles, but you know, some of the bigger crews do it better. But even on a 25-degree day, especially in a humid condition, you can have you know, significant thermal risk. You know, you're wearing longs and longs, glasses, all of those things I mentioned before, and you know, it's such a high risk industry. We've previously used the 35-degree as of the building construction heat or temperature limit. You know, when you're dealing with up to 180-degree asphalt plus the temperature of the plant heats up quite significantly over the day. You know, you've got the screed on the back of the paver, which has got a screed heater on it. You know, that's usually set to at least 180 to ensure that it's not sticking to the screed and it's laying a consistent mat. So yeah, it's a very high risk, and you see really good crews do it well, where they stick together and say, no, we're going to start the job an hour earlier. We're only going to do the straight runs, nice and easy work. Hopefully get the last truck here by 11 o'clock, and we know that's when it starts to get into that, the high risk temperatures. But everyone's doing the same thing. You've only got X amount of asphalt plants, and you got that truck. You could be waiting 2 or 3 hours for that truck to arrive, and that's your highest risk. We've seen really good, skilled asphalt operators step out in front of live traffic because they're just not thinking. Their cognitive ability is reduced because they are suffering heat stress, and then you take in the other factors where you're breathing in over the day, and sometimes they'll be driving home and sort of a bit woozy, and it carries on to the next day, especially if you have multiple days in a row. So it is educating around that and ensuring that we're not just unnecessarily putting hard hats and masks and earmuffs on. Especially if they're working out on a back road somewhere, we are thinking about how we can lower that risk.
Especially with like long pants and long sleeves and all the equipment, and as you say, with the screen heating it up, that would be really, really uncomfortable. Another question: has there been any workers' compensation claims reported in Australia
with asphalt fuming?
Yeah.
Again, the data is limited, right? So even with if you look at silica, that was only a reportable illness only recently, and a lot of the medical professionals would put it down to smoking or what the lifestyle stuff as well, because that is a factor in this space. A lot of people do smoke, but it is, the data is limited, absolutely.
And I think sometimes what we've found with some of our other research is when you get like sort of a continual exposure, sort of a cumulative thing, it's not necessarily just like one bad thing. Like if someone has an accident on a work site, then they would put in the claim but when it's just like a continual small bits, and none of them are kind of worse than any other time, so then they don't end up putting a claim in. But I'm not sure either on that exact one, but that might be something that we could But
we know you go to the GP, they don't know anything about it. So I know personally, when I had concerns, I went to a GP and went to a urologist. He's gone, I don't know what I'm looking for, mate. I can run a blood test, but I don't know what I'm looking for. So trying to make sure that we are ensuring that information, the guys are well informed to say, we're looking for benzene levels or whatever, so that they've got the right questions to ask.
Excellent. Thank you for everyone's questions today, and you've done an amazing job, Nick. We've got one final question, which was from our research impact event, so this will be our last one. Are the learnings from the project also indicating that there are some significant gaps in the systems that are supposed to be in place to identify and respond to risks, such as HSRs and workplace systems?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the report went a long way to show that. The lack of HSRs across the space is significant. We are getting there. There are pushback from employers. Again, I don't want to go too hard on that because I'll be here for a while. But making sure that we do have genuine representation across the industry. But consultation, right? Consultation underpins all of this. And if we had under Section 35 of the Act, the duty for employers to consult, like I said before, the ability for all the worker must have the opportunity to have their views expressed, those views considered prior to any of these decisions being made. Often we're seeing trial polymer mixes, even now, even some of the bigger companies on site on the day, and the worker doesn't know that that's the case. And when they do raise the issue, they go, "Oh well, mate, we've got some masters in the car if you want them. If you're going to complain." And that definitely needs some improvement. But the pro reporting, we are working with the industry to have a QR code type reporting system. I'd like to see it on every docket that every truck that gets delivered. They have to get their docket signed, and there's a carbon copy on that docket, I'd like to see a QR code. That they are working with a QR code. That's a 3-tier system, and that goes to the manager, and then to the senior management, and then off to APA, where the Asphalt Association, where it's stored, and then they can identify where there's consistencies or inconsistencies across the industry, with their limited bitumen supplies, and they can try to track that and find the patterns that around these fuming incidents. And it's like the questionnaire that has been put together is really quite good. Talking about the on-site conditions, what the mix was. There's about 30 odd questions in it. But we might have the bigger companies that are doing that, but if you're putting it onto their dockets, so then your tier 2, tier 3 companies can also have the opportunity to do that. So they are, the data collection, the pattern, finding the patterns where this is happening. That's been part of the problem for such a long time. And the awareness, right? I spoke before about, getting on the road, cutting the hole, cleaning the hole, filling the hole, cleaning up, and getting off the road within that time frame. Making sure that awareness is there. They don't need to stand there if they don't have to. But everybody's, the culture is rush, 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 because that's you're on a time bound industry. So really, you're raising awareness around don't put yourself at risk. You don't necessarily have to stand there. Stand back, let the Bobcat do its work, and then get in there with your broom and your shovel or whatever you need to do. But and I think it is getting there. There's a lot more. I know early days when I became an organizer, the younger workers were probably the harder ones to cut through. And now it's sort of flipped, right? Because this has taken so long to get where it's got to, and there was probably some apathy or some concerns that the changes weren't coming, but the foundation work that needed for us to get there. And now we're seeing the buy-in from the younger ones, coming into the industry new and going, well, this isn't right, and we should be active here. So it is turning around. So
that's good news. Excellent. Thank you so much, Nick. The questions were coming in thick and fast. I'll hand to you, Jimmy.
Once again, thank you both, Nick and Janine, for this fascinating discussion. And it's always great to hear where the research is led to in this area. And I think everyone will agree, it's quite an exciting area of not only the research impact space, but real change happening that can hopefully make our road workers safer as a consequence long term. I encourage everyone to fill out the evaluation survey when you leave today. If you have any additional questions, there is an option there to ask it, and we'll endeavour to answer all inquiries. Once again, thank you all for attending. Thank you also to my team who are busy in the background making sure that this event ran smoothly. And I hope everyone has a great day. Cheers.